It was a quiet afternoon in the city of Orange, California. Maribel Ramos, a woman who had twice stepped into the battlefields of Iraq, who had returned home carrying the pride of a soldier, now stood at the threshold of a new future. She was about to graduate, ready to turn her lifelong dream of serving the community into reality. Friends, colleagues, and her family believed her life was opening into a path filled with hope and light. But inside the small apartment, she shared with her roommate a detail so minor that most would dismiss it, became a chilling clue that something was terribly wrong. The bed, always perfectly made by Maribel every single day, as if it were still a military ritual, was left in complete disarray. A pillow had gone missing. Her loyal dog was left behind, barking restlessly. Her car sat untouched in the parking lot, and her phone remained silent. The contrast was jarring. A life built on strict discipline, suddenly disrupted by chaos inside her own sanctuary. To her family, these weren't oversights. They were warnings. Maribel, a woman who had faced war and death abroad, had now vanished in the very place where she was supposed to be safest. And the haunting question lingered in the air: who erased Maribel Ramos from her own life? And what dark secret was hidden behind the quiet walls of that apartment? Maribel Ramos was not an ordinary woman. She carried within her the steel discipline of a soldier and the warmth of a daughter, a sister, and a friend. Born into a hard-working immigrant family, she learned sacrifice at an early age. While her mother juggled 2 jobs to keep food on the table, young Maribel quietly took on the role of caregiver for her younger siblings. People would later say that even as a teenager she acted like a second mother, both strict and loving, keeping the family together when things threatened to fall apart. Her greatest dream was to wear the uniform of someone who protects her community. After high school, she started small, working as a security guard. It was tough, unglamorous work, but it honed her composure, sharpened her observational skills, and taught her how to stay calm under pressure. Then, in August of 2001, she made a life-changing decision. She enlisted in the United States Army. When the nation was shaken by the attacks of September 11, 2001, Maribel was deployed to Iraq. She served 2 tours of duty, living through nights of gunfire and watching comrades fall. In a place where life and death stood only a breath apart, she proved her strength. She rose to the rank of sergeant and earned the respect of peers and superiors alike. Returning home in 2008, with an honorable discharge, she carried both the glory and the invisible scars of war. Yet Maribel did not slow down. She immediately enrolled in the criminal justice program at California State University, Fullerton, determined to use her battlefield experiences to help other veterans reintegrate into society. Her vision was clear: to fight for those who had once fought for their country. Then came a devastating blow. In 2009, her mother passed away, leaving a painful void. For many, such a loss might have broken their spirit. But for Maribel, it became fuel. She resolved to live not only for herself, but also for the legacy of her mother. During this time to share expenses, she posted an ad for a roommate on Craigslist. Among the many responses, one stood out: Kwang Chol Joy, known as KC, a 54-year-old man who had recently lost both parents and was seeking a fresh start. First impressions were positive, quiet, polite, seemingly a perfect fit for Maribel's busy life. At first, the arrangement seemed ideal. KC was unobtrusive, even helpful, tutoring her niece in math, going out to karaoke, walking dogs together, even treating her to an Alaskan cruise. He called Maribel the sister he never had. To the family, he seemed safe, maybe even kind. But beneath the surface, something darker began to grow: dependence, then fixation. Meanwhile, Maribel's own life was blossoming. She started dating Paul Lopez, prepared for her graduation, made plans for her career, and even dreamed of settling down and starting a family. To her friends, she was a symbol of resilience. To her family, a source of pride and hope. And yet the brighter her light shone, the clearer the shadow became. Casey's behavior grew strange, investing thousands of dollars in his appearance, hinting at romantic feelings, unable to accept her gentle rejection. Maribel sensed unease, but chose kindness. She never wanted to humiliate him. Still deep down, she felt something wasn't right. That unease soon turned into fear so sharp that she picked up the phone and dialed 911. Her words were steady, chilling. "If something happens to me, just know that I was trying to defend myself, and the person I'm afraid of is Casey." Later, those words would echo like a prophecy, a warning of the tragedy to come. On May 3, 2013, the atmosphere at the apartment complex on East Rose Street in Orange suddenly turned heavy. Maribel's car sat motionless as in the lot. Her loyal dog was left inside the unit, barking in distress. To outsiders, these might have seemed like trivial details. But to her sister Lucy, who knew Maribel's rigid habits, they were alarms screaming for attention. Maribel was the type who believed that if she arrived less than 15 minutes early, she was already late. Yet that day, she missed her campus job, skipped her weekly softball game, and turned off her phone. None of this aligned with who she was. The first person to raise concern was not family, but Casey Joy, her 54-year-old roommate. That morning, he contacted Lucy saying her car was still parked outside and that he hadn't seen her all day. Most people might not find this alarming after only a few hours. But Casey seemed oddly eager to file a missing person report almost immediately. His urgency felt unnatural, as though he were preparing for something others weren't yet aware of. Lucy and a cousin rushed to the apartment. The door was locked, no sign of forced entry, everything seemed in place. Yet when Lucy entered Maribel's bedroom, she froze. The bed, always made with military precision, was left in disarray. One pillow was missing. To anyone else, it might look like nothing. To Lucy, it was the loudest warning possible. Something was wrong. Police arrived. At first, they treated the case as a typical disappearance, but the details piled up quickly: the car unloved, the dog abandoned, the unmade bed. These weren't choices of someone who had simply decided to walk away. Naturally, suspicion first turned toward her new boyfriend, Paul Lopez. He cooperated without hesitation, explaining that their relationship was fresh, not exclusive, and that he was still casually seeing others. More importantly, he had a alibi. He was at work from 4 in the afternoon until midnight. On May 2nd, confirmed by his employer, he admitted to phone calls with Maribel that day, but no in-person meeting. Paul was cleared. Before leaving, however, Paul revealed something crucial. On the night of May 2nd, during a phone call, he overheard Maribel and Casey arguing heatedly through speakerphone. The fight: rent money. Maribel was fed up with excuses. She told Casey he had to move out immediately. Casey begged for 2 more weeks without paying. Paul backed her up, even threatening to come over and pack Casey's belongings himself. For investigators, this was chilling. Arguments over money and living arrangements often ignite violence, especially when mixed with jealousy and rejection. More alarming still, detectives soon learned that just 2 weeks earlier, Maribel had called 911, calmly stating that if something happened to her, the person responsible would likely be Casey, and Casey's own behavior raised eyebrows. He claimed that when he returned to the apartment around 9 p.m. on May 2nd, Maribel was gone, and he assumed she left with Paul. But Paul insisted he hadn't seen her. Meanwhile, witnesses recalled Casey sitting silently in his car, watching police outside the apartment instead of helping with the search. A disciplined soldier doesn't just vanish. A careful, punctual woman doesn't abandon her commitments. What started as a missing person case had now transformed into a homicide investigation, and all eyes were fixed squarely on one man, Kwang Chol Casey Joy. To understand the crime, sometimes you must step inside the mind of the one who committed it. Kwang Chol Casey Joy, at 54 years old, entered Maribel Ramos's life as a polite, quiet, seemingly harmless roommate. But beneath that exterior lived a man riddled with loneliness, cracks of instability, and most dangerously, a growing obsession that consumed him. Investigators digging into his past uncovered red flags. Years earlier, bitter inheritance disputes with his sister had escalated until she sought a restraining order, describing his temper as frightening. In 1986, KCC had been charged with assault and battery. In 1987, with aggravated assault. Both cases were dismissed, but the pattern was clear. Anger and impulsivity simmered just beneath the surface. In 2011, he was arrested for driving under the influence. None of these brought long prison terms, yet they painted the picture of a man prone to violence and poor self-control. At first, with Maribel, he seemed like the brother she never had. He went to karaoke nights with her, took her dog for walks, even treated her to an Alaskan cruise. He called her family his own. But the kindness wasn't selfless. It was the scaffolding of fixation. In the summer of 2012, Casey confessed to Maribel's sister Lucy that he was in love, that he wanted to marry Maribel and build a family. Lucy was alarmed, and when she warned her sister, Maribel admitted she had sensed his feelings but had avoided confrontation. Eventually, she told him gently but firmly she didn't share those feelings. Their relationship would remain platonic. That rejection, however mild, was the spark. Casey's behavior changed. He poured thousands of dollars into his appearance, new wardrobe, a tattoo, even cosmetic procedures, totaling nearly $12,000 to look younger. His life revolved around becoming the man he thought she would want. But reality was merciless. Maribel had moved on, starting a healthy relationship with Paul Lopez. For Casey, this was not just heartbreak. It was the crumbling of the only identity he had clung to, being central in her life. On May 2nd, 2013, tensions exploded. Their argument about unpaid rent wasn't simply financial. For Maribel, it was about boundaries. For KCC, it was about survival. Being forced out of her apartment meant being erased from her life. To a man already consumed by obsession, it was intolerable. His actions afterward revealed his unraveling state. Deep scratches lined his arms. First, he said they came from bushes during a walk. Later, he claimed they were from fishing line. Investigators noted the cuts were too deep, too straight, inconsistent with either excuse. Neighbors recalled KCC's talking about filing a missing person report at 10:30 in the morning on May 2nd, far too soon, as if he had already anticipated her disappearance. And when police arrived at the apartment, he didn't join the frantic search. Instead, he sat quietly in his car watching. Inside his apartment, officers discovered a pajama top, stuffed away, matching the bottoms Maribel was last seen wearing. Her DNA was found on the fabric. A scent detection dog alerted to the back seat of his car. Each piece alone was small, but together they formed a mosaic of suspicion. And then came his bizarre online behavior. While the community flooded social media and Yelp with posts hoping for Maribel's safe return, Casey joined in writing long entries about her, but often in the past tense, as if he already knew she was gone. Some brushed it off as awkward phrasing. Detectives saw it differently, an unconscious confession. From the brother figure to an obsessed man, unraveling KCC's joy had crossed the invisible line, where fixation turns lethal. And just days later, technology would reveal the final damning clue, one that led police directly to the canyon, where Maribel's body lay hidden. When every clue pointed toward KCC's Joy, detectives knew they needed something undeniable. The DNA on the pajama top, the dog alerting in his car, the scratches on his arms, all were compelling, but none formed a final blow. Casey still carried himself with calm detachment, even giving media interviews about his missing roommate. But that desire for attention made him easier to track. Investigators placed him under round-the-clock surveillance. Since his laptop had been seized, Casey relied on public computers at the library. Detectives disguised among patrons monitored his activity, while forensic software recorded every keystroke. At first, he browsed routine sites, emails, job boards, social media. But then came the moment that froze the surveillance team. On the screen appeared the search, "How long does it take DNA to decay?" That question wasn't idle curiosity. It was a man preoccupied with evidence. Minutes later, Casey opened a map program zooming in and out of remote canyon areas outside Orange. His cursor lingered over an isolated stretch of wilderness, far from trails and homes. For detectives, it was as good as a confession. Even as Casey sat in the library, officers were dispatched to the very canyon he studied. On May 17, 2013, under the searing California sun, a search team discovered human remains. A distinctive tattoo confirmed what everyone feared they had found: 36-year-old Maribel Ramos. Casey walked into his next interview, believing police were still grasping at shadows. He insisted she must have left with her boyfriend, denied involvement, even joked awkwardly. But when pressed about his injuries, his shifting alibis and the timeline, his composure cracked. Abruptly, he stood and stormed out of the interrogation room. Waiting officers moved in. On him, they found Maribel's military ID card, a personal token he had carried since her death. At trial, prosecutors painted him as a lonely, obsessed man who killed in a fit of rage when rejected, and then tried to conceal the crime. They outlined the chain of evidence: the 911 call, where Maribel voiced her fear of Casey Soeth, the pajama top with her DNA, the suspicious scratches, the internet searches, the canyon map, and most damning, his digital trail leading police directly to her body. The defense conceded that Maribel had died in the apartment, but argued that her death could have been from medical complications, post-traumatic stress disorder, or alcohol. They claimed KCC panicked, hid the body, and became trapped in a storm of circumstantial suspicion. Without a clear medical cause of death, they said the state's case was speculation. But the jury saw the pattern. Each coincidence aligned too neatly. Each fragment of evidence reinforced the next. In the end, they returned a verdict of second-degree murder. Casey Joy was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. For Maribel's family, the words "guilty" brought some measure of justice. Yet the victory was hollow. No sentence could restore the woman who had survived war only to be betrayed in her own home. Graduation day at California State University Fullerton should have been the brightest moment of Maribel Ramos's life. She had poured sweat, tears, and her youthful years in the military to earn that degree. But when the ceremony came, it was her young niece Giselle who walked across the stage. In her hands was a framed photo of her aunt. The auditorium fell silent, a haunting reminder that while Maribel's life had been stolen, her dreams still lived on through her family. Her loved ones exhaled when justice was finally delivered. Casey Joy was sentenced to 15 years to life, yet justice in this case was never enough. As one family member said, "He may be behind bars, but our pain will never be set free."
Mr. Joy needs to be put away for life. He is an evil man and a coward that should never be forgiven.
Every day they still saw the messy bed, remembered the abandoned dog, and replayed that chilling 911 call where Maribel had practically predicted her own fate. Behind prison walls, Casey continued to proclaim his innocence. He wrote letters to the court and even drafted a manuscript titled "Suspect Guilty Until Proven Innocent."
Family wants me to apologize, which I cannot apologize for something I haven't done. Maybe someday truth will come up. Maybe I just die inside of prison.
In his narrative, he was the victim of a rush to judgment. To Maribel's family, those words were not redemption. They were salt rubbed into an unhealed wound. This story does not end with a verdict. It is a warning about the price of obsession. When affection twists into possession, when love becomes a cage, the outcome can be devastating. Maribel Ramos, daughter, sister, soldier, fought her entire life for survival and for justice. Yet within her own home, she was undone by the very person she once called friend. If you want to follow more true crime stories where justice and darkness collide, stay with us. Because sometimes to truly understand evil, we must look unflinchingly into the darkest corners of the human heart.